I actually concluded, gave a ruling, and hit the gravel. So I recall bringing the table officers' attention and showing them the evidence to correct the votes and proceedings. So please take note and make the appropriate correction. Yes, Honorable Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I want to hear you clear. You are on page 9, and you are, as far as we are concerned, what reflects in page 5 is a true reflection of what transpired in this House. Page 9, that I moved a motion relying on Standing Order 51 and 2, as was done by my colleague, the Majority Leader, a day before. And Mr. Speaker, you are seeking to correct this. Yes, there was an uproar because you had to put the question on the motion that was so ably moved by me and seconded by the Honorable Mahama Yarga. Under the circumstance, there was some disorderliness in the House. And as far as we are concerned, you suspended the House. And second deputy came to adjourn the House. Now, when I hear you now saying that you are giving directives to table, directives to do what? Mr. Speaker, directives to do what? Because you told this House that you are not the Speaker, you are a Member of Parliament for Bekwai, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, if you are a Member of Parliament for Bekwai, my application was to the Speaker. You said you are not the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so if you say that you want to correct it, Mr. Speaker, the only correction I should think, which must reflect, and I hope that you direct able to do so, is that in moving my motion, I copiously and judiciously made references to Article 102 of the 1992 Constitution and Standing Order 109 of the Parliament of Ghana, which must also reflect, because in the previous day, as the Honorable Osei Mensah made reference to the Constitution and standing orders, his have been recognized in the votes and proceedings. What is good for the goose must be good for the gander. I want this because, Mr. Speaker, you are yourself a lawyer. Authoritatively, parliamentary debates have become a guide to interpretation beyond the British ruling in paper and hand. And therefore, we know that reference to the Constitution and reference to our standing order must at all times be respected. So I have a difficulty with the directive that you are giving the table, because as far as we are concerned, I moved the motion. The motion was seconded by the Honorable Mahama Yarga. When the debate, as recorded, the debate concluded. After conclusion of debate, Mr. Speaker, yours is simply to put the question, nothing more. But I think that it would be wrong for you to direct table to attempt to tamper or alter what is reported in page 9. Suffice it to add, the table added that I made reference to Article 102, that the person presiding shall not be part of what constitutes quorum, and the person presiding shall not be part of a decision that should be taken. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, what is an issue here is that we are correcting votes and proceedings. What is reported here is not correct. Whether the minority leader thinks that I was not entitled to rule is another matter. But what I'm saying here is that I ruled. What is reported here is that I was ruling and it was interrupted. So it appears that the ruling did not conclude, but it did conclude. That's all I want the vote to reflect. That is not about yes or no. That is what happened. And the record is available. The table office heard the video. I played it out to them when I saw this, that this is the video of what I did, and that is how it concluded. So let the votes and proceedings reflect what happened. After raising issues with them is entitled, you're always entitled to raise issues with what you think I ought to have done or ought not to have done. That is a different matter altogether. So let the vote and proceedings reflect that.
Well, the Speaker was clear on his position, Haruna Drisu was, but after all that exchange, he then put it to him in on the floor what his intentions are, that he was not simply going to let this lie.
Speaker, so is it the ruling which was interrupted for which you could not rule, or you are ruling that there is a new position? Let me serve you notice, Mr. Speaker, that under Order 93.5, I will file a motion to question your conduct as Speaker or as member for Bekwai, wherever is appropriate, because this directive you are given does not, and we ourselves will call the recording for scrutiny, and we'll look at it closely, because as far as you know, Mr. Speaker, you attempted to rule, and there was an uproar, and there was a suspension, and subsequently an adjournment. That is all we know. So, Mr. Speaker, I intend to invoke Order 93.5 that I'll serve you, I'll submit your conduct, because you cannot operate with these standing orders at your whims and caprices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I want to take it to Parliament now, because in the last few minutes, we have cited a copy of that motion that has now been filed formally. My colleague, parliamentary correspondent Parker Wilson, joins us on the telephone line. Parker, you've seen this copy of the motion. What does it say? Hello, Parker.
Minority Leader himself, Haruna Idrisu, dated 7 December 2021. Now, the motion reads that this Honorable House sets aside the purported ruling of the First Deputy Speaker, Mr. Joseph Osei-Owusu, MP, delivered on Wednesday, 1st December 2021, against the motion moved by the Honorable Minority Leader, Mr. Haruna Idrisu, and seconded by the Honorable Member of Parliament for Boko Central, Mr. Mama Ayaga, as captured on page 9 of the vote and proceedings of Wednesday, 1st December 2021, on grounds that it contravenes the rules, conventions, and practices of the House and was actuated by bias, respectfully submitted. So the concern or the allegation here is that Joseph Osei-Owusu, being the First Deputy Speaker of Parliament, of course, MP for Bekwai, was biased in his ruling, and that is why the minority is challenging that particular ruling.
So the effect of this is that they, in essence, want to overturn the approval of the budget. That's what it's down to. That
is what it is. In essence, they want to overturn the approval of the 2022 budget, which was actually witnessed by one-sided majority House. You remember that happened somewhere last week, Tuesday. And so that is what the minority wants to set aside. So if they are successful with this motion, what it means is that the budget would be rejected. But for now, we can officially confirm that Parliament has approved the 2022 budget. And Evans, one interesting thing you need to note is that this motion should be adopted by the First Deputy Speaker. So the question here is it going to adopt it or not? We are yet to cross that bridge.
I mean, so that is an assumption that this, because the substantive speaker, Aban Bagbi, is not back until the 14th, right?
Yes, since the speaker is not here, the First Deputy Speaker is clothed with the power to admit motions from MPs. And since he is being challenged, the question some of the minority members are raising is, they are a bit skeptical whether the First Deputy Speaker would admit the motion. Now, when he admits the motion, it would be advertised and then subsequently be debated upon. So the first hurdle the minority has to cross is whether or not this motion, as they are filed, would be admitted by the First Deputy Speaker.
And of course, if that happens, then eventually this goes down to a vote.
That's correct. What happens is going to open for debate. The minority will speak, they will share their opinion on the issue. The majority will do the same. And then you put the motion to a vote. That is when they will determine whether the minority will have their way or the majority will do so.
More substantively today, though, back to the budget. We know yesterday the finance minister addressed a press conference and put forward government's concessions. and he announced that he had formally written to the Speaker so the amendments can be formally included in what the committees will be considering. That came to the floor today. How did that go? Was this successfully included in the formal amendments of the budget?
We can report to our listeners that was indeed incorporated into the 2022 budget. In fact, when the amendments or the alterations were laid before the House, there were a few concerns raised by the minority. One of the major concerns were that even though they do not subscribe to the budget, they have concerns again with the absence of the finance minister in the chamber, because he has moved the motion. He should have been in the chamber to also lay before the House the amendment or the changes to the budget or the review to the budget. And so that was a concern raised by the minority. But then Haruna Iddrisu was very emphatic, Evans. His point is clear that the minority has been very consistent with opposing the introduction of the e-levy. And even though there were 5 demands made by the minority, 4 of them have been sort of admitted or reviewed by the government. And the one critical issue is the e-levy, which government is still standing at the 1.75%. And so Haruna, commenting on the amendment, indicated that the minority is still opposed to the e-levy.
Mr. Speaker, yes, it's true that we engage. You were part of the engagement. But at that engagement, Mr. Speaker, regrettably and unfortunately, on the vexed matter of e-levy, we could not have agreement and consensus as captured by the minister's own statement in paragraph 7, when he states, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, on the matter of the e-levy, having regard to its serious fiscal implications, we will continue our consultations. Mr. Speaker, we believe that the e-levy is punitive. It will undermine our quest to grow a digital economy. Is seeking to tax transactions. Mr. Speaker, we are guided by the public good, and we think that monies recoverable from the Auditor General report can as well compensate for the imposition of an e-levy. So, Mr. Speaker, we on this side, we are unable to support government in its quest to impose an e-levy at 1.75% on Momo and associated transactions, including remittances and bank transactions. Therefore, we stand opposed, and at every level that e-levy is introduced, we will stand united to oppose it, because it will inflict hardships on the core poor of the Ghanaian people. And we stand opposed to it, as I indicated earlier, that you don't tax capital, you tax income and revenue. So, Mr. Speaker, whilst we see that he has made overtures on Ejapa and correctional statements relating to ACA and fees and charges, to which he now accepts that he has no mandate for an automatic 15% every other year. As I indicate, that will amount to a usurpation of our mandate. So, Mr. Speaker, on the vexed issue of e-levy, we are unable to support government and would continue to oppose it, and oppose it in its entirety.
So the fight moves to the committee level. Thankfully, I've just been joined by the Minority Chief Whip Muntaka Mubarak. Mr. Mubarak, I'm grateful that you could join me here on Top Story.
Good evening to you and your listeners.
We've just seen this motion that has just been filed, dated 7th December 2021, signed by your colleague Haruna Iddrisu, with the minority leader, and to set aside the purported ruling of the Speaker. What's the point of this?
Well, the point is that, we know that the rules of the House, the practice of the House, He said that what the First Deputy Speaker is supposed to have done on Wednesday amount to, in our view, abuse and bias of the privilege that is extended to him. And you know, the way our standing orders is couched, whether you look at Order 98 or Order 93.5, while Speaker makes ruling and is sitting, you cannot do anything but to challenge him if you disagree with him through a substantive motions. And that's what we seek to do, because we believe that what he did on that day was not fair. I mean, even for every person that is very familiar with the practice of parliament anywhere in the world, when the minority did move the motion and got seconded, it moves away from the control of the speaker and is now on the floor. It is only the floor that can make a determination to what happens to it. And usually what we do is through voting, and it can go through about 3 or 4 stages. One, through voice votes, where people can challenge the speaker's voice decision for a head count. If we are still not satisfied, call for a division and what have you. So we believe clearly what Speaker did on Wednesday was very biased. I mean, it wasn't fair. He was just trying to take advantage of his affiliation with the ruling government party to give a ruling that is favorable to them, not because it fits the rules of the House or our practice in the House. So we are seeking to formally challenge that decision. And it is our hope that he'll be mindful of Article 296, that where you are invested with privileges and positions of such as the one that is occupying, he will not be capricious. He will be minded to be fair and not biased, even in admitting the motion.
I was coming to that because that's a major hurdle. You honestly, sincerely believe that you're challenging him. I mean, this is basically one that is rare in the floor. He will admit this?
Well, why not, Evans? Because you see, all these things that we are all doing, we should remember that there's posterity. And I know Right Honorable Speaker or the First Deputy Speaker Osewusu, and I want to believe that he's a gentleman, and he will try to adhere to the rules, not to show the kind of bias that he showed on Wednesday. So we are optimistic that we will exhaust all the avenues open to us. Obviously, we don't want a situation where because you disagree with the speaker, you go rank cross. And we condemn that, and we believe that that is not a good thing to do. So ours is to exhaust all the opportunities and that the standing orders and the Constitution provides us. And we are mindful, knowing that, yes, he is to admit it, and we are very hopeful that he may disagree with us, but he will give us an opportunity to be heard on the floor on this so that we can point out and use examples of our presidents and the practice of the House to convince the other members beyond reasonable doubt that this is something that Mr. Speaker did wrong and needs to be corrected, so that it doesn't stand the test of time in history, that when an opportunity came for him to do what is right, he chose to be that biased on Wednesday. So we are hopeful that he will admit it.
You use the word hopeful, so you are hoping. What if he doesn't do what you hope for?
Well, I mean, you know, the way our standing orders is, if you notice the way it's structured, it vests a lot of powers in the speaker. It gives the speaker a lot of powers. But I'm very mindful that all of us as members of parliament will definitely know one day will have to be remembered. I know all of us will want to be remembered for the good reasons. I don't think any of us wants to be remembered for the wrong reasons. That when the opportunity came for you to do what is right, you chose to emphasize on maybe partisan or other consideration rather than the oath that you took. So, yes, we know that, I mean, the speaker has a lot of powers, and under his influence and the power that he has, he can do a lot of things. If he fails to admit it, well, that would have meant that it will stand in the records that when this happened, we give him an opportunity to correct what he did wrong, and he failed to take advantage of it and still stood by the balanced position that he took on Wednesday.
But there's no chance that you take this out to the House. This is, if it doesn't admit it, you leave it there. At least you would have made your point.
Well, even then, you are telling me to tell you all our strategy and what we are going to do from start to end. And that will be difficult for me to tell you as a chief whip, because, I mean, you have so many things that you avail to you that you can use, and you don't need to share that in the public domain, that if this fails, this is what I will do. You will surely have to keep some of these things to your chest and then wait, hoping that he will not deny us the opportunity for this motion to be heard on the floor of Parliament.
But to be clear, the effect of what you're seeking to do is to set aside the approval of the budget.
Definitely. Because we believe that what they did on Tuesday, that's 30th of November, was absolutely wrong. And we sought to correct it on Wednesday. And we believe that Wednesday, if you had allowed the voting to happen, knowing very well that, I mean, a number of them were not there, I mean, we could have carried the day. Worst scenario, if all of them were there and all of us were there, excluding him, he could have tied and we could have lost it. But at least we would have known that we followed through the process to its final conclusion, and we only lost. And in a democracy, you cannot insist that you must win at all costs. Sometimes you do things just for the record, to place on record that when this wrong was happening, you took the necessary steps. It's only that in a democracy like ours, where it is just a majoritarian system, whilst the majority says yes, it says yes. Not necessarily that they are right, but once they vote in a certain line, that is what will happen. So we would have been happier if that day he had allowed the voting, and then we tie at 137. I mean, we would have been happy with that. You see, let me take those opportunity to say this. For those who didn't understand why we were not in the chamber on Tuesday, it is for this reason. Because we know that as speakers, one of the avenues, one of the privileges or the opportunities available to them is to go blind, to go blind when it is time for voting, and deliberately pretend and not call for the voting. And if we were in the chamber that day and he did what he did on Wednesday, what would have meant is that he could have just said, oh, they had it. And then our numbers will be counted as those who were present. And they will be 275. So the decision they would have taken, we would have been there to legitimize it without the opportunity to vote. And this was exactly how our prediction, that he would take advantage to pretend not to see us and will not call for the vote, yet our presence in the chamber will have legitimized what they were going to do. That was why we stayed away. I think he has now proven us right why we stayed away on Tuesday, because if on Tuesday we were there and he repeated exactly what he did on Wednesday, our presence would have been meaningless, because we would be there and yet it will be useless because it will not be counted. He will not allow the voting to happen. We hope that challenging his decision will also send a notice to him that in future, where he's sitting, and then there's the need for voting, he will just not repeat what he did. He will be cognizant that we could challenge his decision by a substantive motion. And let me say this finally. Every speaker is particular about this thing. How many of your decisions are challenged on record? Because posterity will surely count them. And I'm sure that he's mindful of that.
And very finally today, you asked for you made some demands. Majority of them, the finance minister says, well, they've made some concessions. Today, that was formally adopted and forwarded to the committee's level for consideration. The only sticking point, and Haruna Idrisu made it, was the e-levy, which government says he still wants to consult on. Haruna is very clear that you are not going to budge until that is zeroed. In other words, scrapped. Is there any room there for some consensus on that matter?
Well, I mean, as in a democracy, you can never rule out discussions, meetings, give in and takeaways. You can never rule them out. But believe me, with the e-levy, it is something that is very top on our agenda. And I believe that when we met for those discussions, we stated them. And that was why at the beginning of that discussion, we stated very clearly that until everything is agreed, nothing is agreed. And unfortunately, we couldn't agree on that, and we couldn't also agree on the procedure to use in the chamber, and therefore the negotiation broke down. We stand by our words. So long as they are very recalcitrant and standing where they are with e-levy, we stand opposed to it, and we will oppose it at every stage that it finds expression throughout this budget till appropriation. So they should be rest assured that we will oppose that. obviously, no politician will say that if they call you for, I mean, you can even see, even before the e-levy comes in, I mean, they are already planning how they are going to havoc it, vulture it. 241 million of it already is earmarked for the operators. And then they are talking about platform. The MTN and the other telcos already have the platform to do this. Yet they are allocating almost about $40 million. You can see clearly it is not about just raising revenue, but it's about wasting them. And that is why in this estimate, how they spend 2021 budget will scrutinize heavily to make sure that those wastes are brought to minimum.
I'm grateful, Muntaka Mubarak. He is the minority chief whip there on the many issues in Parliament. There's more news tonight, including a fight over the use of our presidential jet by other presidents.
Your friends are getting money. You are so broke. This festive season with the Vodafone Kosu promo. Just recharge, earn red coins.